Hey guys, what's up? I'm here with a review of a comedy, a comedy, crime, fantasy, horror, exploitation film from 1977 from legendary exploitation film director John Waters. For those of you who do not know, I'm a big fan of John Waters. I really enjoy his stuff. It's very dark, gross, trashy, and, most of all, exploitive. John Waters is most well known for probably his, what I would consider to be his masterpiece of trash cinema, Pink Flamingos from 1972, starring the great Divine. Pink Flamingos is one of my favorite 70s horror films, and definitely a landmark of exploitation cinema. Tonight, I have a movie that my friend from The New Fury, the Metal News site The New Fury, has recommended to me, Desperate Living. Desperate Living, he says, is as trashy as Pink Flamingos, but it has more meaning to it. Now, while I love Pink Flamingos for its meaningless, just trashy for the sake of being trashy kind of aesthetic, I can get behind, pointless, senseless trashiness and grossness and violence with a meaning. I can definitely get behind that, totally. So, tonight's movie is Desperate Living. Desperate Living is basically a movie about a neurotic, rich woman, and she thinks that people are out to get her. She thinks she's very paranoid, neurotic, and really crazy, too, honestly. She thinks that everybody's out to get her. A baseball flies through her window in the beginning of the movie, and she thinks it's somebody trying to make an assassination attempt on her. Her and her psychiatric nurse end up accidentally killing her husband, and they end up having to flee to Mortville, a community, a shantytown community of thieves, murderers, rapists, just terrible people in general, that is built on top of a landfill. It is the city is run by a queen who is played by Edith Massey, who was the egg lady in Pink Flamingos. She was also in, I forget who she was in Female Trouble, and this is also the first John Waters feature film to not have Divine in it. Now, while the fact that Divine is going to be missing from the cast in this film is kind of a negative for me, because I really like Divine. Divine is great in Female Trouble. Divine was great in Pink Flamingos. Divine was great in Multiple Maniacs. Here, Divine is not present. Hopefully, that does not spoil the experience I will have with this movie. So, without further ado, guys, let's kick back, relax, and watch Desperate Living. Oh. So, the movie, as I said, follows a housewife and her psychiatric nurse going on the run after they accidentally kill her husband. When they get to Mortville, they're taken in by a lesbian couple who eat roadkill. The two women, Liz and I can't remember the one main chick's name. She was played by Mink, who was Connie Marble in Pink Flamingos. But they're basically captured by Queen Carlotta, who is played by Edith Massey. Captured by the Queen Carlotta, who basically, her police force, who then take her to the Queen's castle, where they're force-fed live roaches and then given a complete makeover to make them look like the citizens of Mortville. And from there, things get more and more weird and surreal, as John Waters' works tend to get weirder and weirder as it starts off, oh, that's pretty weird, and then it just gets worse from there. Like any John Waters film, you should not go into this film expecting any level of good movie making or good taste or seriousness at all. Now, I will admit the camera work and lighting and music, everything from a technical standpoint is really good. The sets are really, really nice. But what you should go in to expect is all around absolute tastelessness, cheesy acting, memorable characters, sex, and violence. And this is what Desperate Living has quite a bit of. The acting overall, like I said, is pretty cheesy, but it's good for what the film is as a exploitation film. It doesn't need to have good acting as long as it's entertaining. It's not a serious movie. It doesn't necessarily need good acting. Of course, the characters are memorable, and there's enough weird stuff and surrealism in the film to go around. All I really need to say is, if you like Waters' early stuff, like Multiple Maniacs, Pink Flamingos, Female Trouble, this film is, I would say, right up your alley, and I could highly recommend it. While not as depraved as Pink Flamingos or Female Trouble is, I think its filthiness and depravity is more on par with Multiple Maniacs, at least with on-screen kind of depravity, and Multiple Maniacs is pretty filthy still. Considering that this is John Waters' first film ever to receive an R rating and not a X rating, or at least the rating for today would be NC-17 rating straight out, like he did with Female Trouble or Multiple Maniacs or Pink Flamingos. Those earlier films, really any film he made before Desperate Living, always got an X rating, and he never fought it because he didn't care. This was his first film, apparently, to receive an R rating without any cuts, which is extraordinary to me, because the level of sex, well, not like, just, I mean, like, sex, not, there isn't, like, any full-on sex in this film, and it's not as sexually explicit as, like, Pink Flamingos, but it is, there's a lot of nudity, both male and female, and, there's a lot of talk of sex, and there's even mention of gang rape and abortions, sex change, and there were mentions of some of these kinds of things in his previous works as well. But it's amazing that this film does not hold an X rating or an R rating. Even by today's standards, I would still think that if you were to show this to the MPAA, they would not say this could get an R rating. They would, I have a feeling that they would say that this is like an immediate NC-17, but this somehow got an R, which is really strange, considering the decent amount of sexual content and violent content in the film. I'd have to say that on the gore meter from 1 to 10, 1 being something like Nosferatu and 10 being something like Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, let me just... Desperate Living sits at about, I want to say a 3. A 3, maybe a 2.5, maybe a 2. His content, the sexual content in the film is... But the level of violence in the film isn't super high, obviously, by the particularly low number I'm giving this one out of a 10. For Waters, it's about average. I would say that the level of violence, at least based on, his earlier works, I would say it's about his average kind of level of violence. There was a little more blood and gore in this one than in Pink Flamingos. I would probably have to say it's maybe about the same as Female Trouble. It's been a few years since I've seen Female Trouble. But overall, I personally really liked the movie, and I thought it was entertaining as hell and trashy as Waters can get. I mean, this isn't his absolute trashiest piece of work, but it's definitely a pretty a pretty sleazy piece of exploitation cinema. I liked it about as much as Female Trouble, and I will still sit here and say that Pink Flamingos is probably his masterpiece. I still think Pink Flamingos is probably his very best work. I'd probably have to give this one a 4, maybe a 4.5 out of 5, which equates to an 8 or a 9 out of 10. Please keep in mind I do rate based on the entertainment value, or how entertained, or how interesting, or how interesting a film is. I do not rate based on whether or not it's a well-made movie. So that is my rating. This is Biscuit Boo for Reviews. Signing off. Peace.